Hey folks, so I wanted to check in on the week 12 readings. As you've seen by this point, they're very much moving in a new direction, but it's not an unconnected one. There's some very strong linkages to things we've done before, and you're even seeing a person that we've seen before as well. So, let me just kind of scan over the major points for you. Really, the big thing that I want you to see this week is the linkages between Jordan and Wheatley, the linkages between Anzaldúa and Cliff, and then to some degree, the linkages between all four of them, because they're kind of talking about some very similar things. Jordan, very gifted poet in her own right, and I love some of the poems of hers that we have in here. But her piece about Black poetry in America, Difficult Miracle of Black Poetry in America, is outstanding. I think it is one of the more interesting and beautiful pieces that I've read that works in theory, but very much on the author's terms, that she's talking about why Phillis Wheatley is interesting, but she's doing it in this very lyrical, poetic, expressive way. And I really love that personally. And she's making some excellent points, particularly some of her repeated refrains of, was it a nice day? Did it matter? And especially, it was not natural and she was the first. Wheatley herself, a lot of people dismiss. Her poetry it doesn't match our standards at this point for being something interesting, for being something, dare I say, good for some of it. It's very elaborate. It's very flowery. It's very much of its time. Some of it we can enjoy. Some of it we can see something in. Some of it feels occasionally like a little bit of a slog. If you feel that way, I don't blame you. But it's important partially because of the poems themselves, but partially because of who wrote them. The sheer fact that this woman, when she was very young, comparatively was writing these poems, and that this was somebody who had come over from Africa as a slave and was able to achieve this. Again, to quote Jordan, it was not natural and she was the first. There was nothing natural about the situation. So looking at Wheatley, even if you're having moments reading it, or you're just kind of, this language, it's so dense and it's so flowery, I get it. But look both at the work itself and what it means and why it's important. To move to our more modern duo, Cliff, Jamaican and American, she's interesting. Again, this is a very theory-based kind of piece that she's exploring some very different issues of bias and prejudice, that she is looking at, that she's very much looking at colonization, and she's looking at things coming between Black and white communities, but she's also looking at different communities within that. She's looking at a phenomenon known as colorism, the issue of having bias within a community of color based on the darkness of your skin. So she's got multiple fronts that she's very engaged upon. And she's very aware of her status, where she has this very multi-ethnic identity, and that she's talking about herself and her family as quote-unquote red, lighter skinned than some of the people around them. So she's simultaneously, for some people, an object of derision, an object of scorn. And then at the same time, she's this very privileged person. that her hair is long, that it's wavy, not curly, that as a child she plays the good parts when they're playing make-believe. So she's existing in this world between. And one of the things that I love about Cliff is she's fiery. She's vicious all around. And she's very much taking on the difficulty of her position from all these different angles. And then going to Anzaldúa, who you will probably remember from Speaking in Tongues. Same person. This is just skimming the surface of her Borderlands theory, which I frankly love. I think it's fascinating as a way to conceptualize a difference. But in this, she's very much looking at living in the Borderlands as a place between these different identities. And some people have extended the theory further to say, okay, what about somebody who is of a particular race, a particular ethnicity, a particular religion, a particular sexual orientation, a particular gender, and that these all are borders on borders on borders on borders, and you're existing between these identities. It's a really interesting way to look at it. And the way it joins together, to some degree, even though Wheatley certainly never made the choice to come to America, she is simultaneously working within two different cultures. She's coming from Africa. She's showing that she's assimilated to her American culture. But at the same time, she's still trying to maintain that little bit of almost pride that she talks about, particularly where she's talking about the possibility from being brought from Africa to America. That, remember, Christians, Negroes black as Cain, may be refined and join the angelic train. So she's certainly in her work. No, she's not painting. She's not painting blackness as the ultimate beauty. She very much is looking at flaxen hair and white concepts of what's beautiful. But at the same time, she's still maintaining some degree of dignity and pride in herself and where she's coming from. She's trying to do both. And again, I mean, that was a poem she wrote when she was 16 years old. I don't know about you guys. My writing when I was 16, I was not juggling multiple identities in provocative and interesting ways. I was complaining about someone I had a crush on. So, you know, we can scorn Wheatley a little bit now, but wow, it's not fair. She really was Phyllis Miracle. So anyway, so I want you to use the things we've been thinking and talking about and roll them into here, looking at other kinds of difference and how they layer on each other and where these borders are. Because I think this is a really interesting and provocative area to dig into. Anyway, I will sign off for now and look forward to reading more reactions online and see what you guys think about this stuff, okay? Take care. Bye.